We got to the 12-week scan and everything was perfect, and we did all the tests and they all came back no problem. And literally I got to 25 weeks and I started bleeding. I thought I was having a miscarriage, because that's the first thing you know about miscarriages, is that you bleed. But I could still feel him kicking, so I thought it must be okay. I thought as soon as the bleeding stops, fine, we'll go home. But that wasn't going to happen. They decided then that I was in labour, and so they decided to do a C-section. Jack was born at 25 weeks plus 2 days. When I came round, you expect to have your baby with you, but of course he wasn't there. He wasn't next to us. He was in the incubator. They put long lines in to feed him intravenously. He was immediately put on oxygen. I couldn't hold him. He was so delicate. Red raw skin. There were tiny stick legs and a head the size of like a ping pong ball. You learn all about the figures that they're supposed to be at, the numbers they're supposed to show on their monitors. You don't watch your baby, you watch the monitor. They'd obviously done scans, they did ultrasound, and they moved me into a side room, which I thought, oh gosh, they obviously think things are going to go wrong here. And that's when they identified that he had got an issue. The nurses started then talking about NEC, and then we started to understand a bit more how serious it was.
So necrotizing enterocolitis, or NEC, is an infection or inflammation of the bowel. If you have a bowel that's inflamed, you cannot be fed. And if you're a very small baby, then you need to be fed to grow. So if you can't use your gut to be fed, that's a really big problem. NEC happens so suddenly that babies can go from being very well to very ill, and sadly sometimes dying within a very short space of time.
They took a tiny piece of the bowel out. He didn't feed, his tummy was bloated still, there was still something going on, which meant that we had to go for an emergency operation. And it was at that point that they said, if it doesn't improve, then we will stop care. And effectively, we were told that you won't take your son home alive. I didn't go and see him very much in those first few days, because I didn't know if he would survive, and I didn't want to become attached. We were in hospital for 4.5 months. He had seven procedures. He was definitely a surgical baby. 2 weeks past his due date that we managed to bring him home. So as a result of the preterm birth and the NEC, he ended up with chronic lung disease. He had speech delay, he had developmental delay in terms of his physical development, and we had a diagnosis of mild cerebral palsy. At home we need to do physio. He has a mechanical horse that he rides because that helps his hips. We go to the shop. We also have to spend quite a lot of time with him on his writing and his reading. I see the differences, but he doesn't, and that to me that's really good. And nothing phases him. Nothing at all.
So it's thought that NEC is caused by an overreaction or overstimulation of the immune response and inflammation in the colon. What we're trying to do is find bacterial viruses, otherly known as bacteriophages, in breast milk that may protect or prevent NEC downstream. So with the Action Medical Research funding, it's allowing us to survey lots of breast milk samples for these bacterial viruses and then look at how that correlates to the clinical data, so which children moved towards NEC, which children didn't. Then we can start to map those viruses versus what's protective and what's not.
The emotional toll of sitting by your baby's bedside watching the roller coaster that is unfortunately life after preterm birth, I think it's a very difficult time for families. So the best outcome for this research would be that we would be able to prevent NEC.
There are children and babies that get NEC that don't survive. We were one of the lucky ones. If you're considering putting money into Action Medical Research and supporting them as a charity, don't hesitate to do it. Without that funding, babies are going to have life-changing and life-altering conditions. So without your support, that research can't be done, and without that research, children like my little boy Jack, they may not be here.